This is News and Views Thursday. We're taking on the big stories of the news. How does it relate to you? And, well, what's the God story in it all? We started the program talking about some of the natural disasters, the seismic activity, the looming storms. Being prepared, not just being prepared physically, being prepared that we don't always know what's going to happen tomorrow anyway. So making the most of every opportunity, but also understanding that there may be more afoot. Now, Erika Grey, you know her, she's a regular on our program. She often comes on and talks about Bible prophecy. That's where she is gifted. Her website is erikagray.com. And on her website, you can find Bible prophecy news, analysis. You can find out what's going on around the world and how all these pieces kind of seem to fit together. They fit together like a puzzle, like someone's designed it. So while, yes, there are some big news stories like the extreme cold and the looming storms in the Northeast, here we have seismic activity, as we've talked about, on Mount St. Helens, and the worry of the Cascadia big earthquake. So there's just so much afoot. What does it mean? How can we be biblically prepared? Since we've talked about being emotionally and physically prepared, then how's it fit in with Bible prophecy? And that is what we're taking on today with our friend, Erika Grey. Erika, Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. It's already starting with a bomb cyclone that's hit the Northeast.
Now,
and,
this is perfect because
right now.
Exactly. I was going to say this is perfect because you are sitting in the midst of this storm in the Northeast while we're here with relatively calm gray skies, maybe a drizzle here or two, typical Seattle weather. But it is really coming onto you over there. We have our own problems on this side. We've experienced that this year. It's been very interesting when one part of the country was burning. The other part, our part, was kind of burning, really.
Absolutely.
The east part,
records.
Exactly. And the eastern side of the United States was drowning. So now we are dealing with more issues. Let's talk about what you're experiencing in the storm.
Unbelievable cold. It's when this storm exits, it's going to be below zero temperatures. The storm, actually, where I'm located, has not been terrible because we haven't had a power outage. But someone on my Facebook page from Massachusetts, their power went out, and he just posted that it's back on again. Thank the Lord, because I can't even imagine what that would be like, but I had to make preparation for it. And I started to provide on my Amazon shop page products for this cold because I found myself needing them, like long johns that I had tucked away.
That's a bit of the interesting part of looming problems, storms, earthquakes, whatever it may be. It is always, always good when you hear a program like this to turn it up and listen in and remind yourself of what you haven't done to prepare, the kind of things that you need. Now, how do you prepare for, because we've been talking a bit about physically preparing. We'll also talk about spiritually preparing as well, but how do you physically prepare besides your long johns for these winter storms and pending disaster?
Well, I had a plan if there was a power outage. You have to have a plan because the temperatures are so low that if there's a power outage, this is serious. So I was going online, actually, and seeing some preparation, posting some on one of my articles. I did an article about the cold and the extreme cold before this hit, and some preparation from freezing pipes. If you find yourself without power, how to preserve the warmth in your home so that you can, sustain yourself. But a storm like this is just frightening, and already I believe there's like 4 deaths here on the Northeast.
I am so sorry to hear that.
We don't see that.
No, and the one thing that I might say is maybe a silver lining is that when we have we're not experiencing a storm at this time. Our big news stories are coming out of the seismic realm, where we're seeing earthquakes in the Bay Area. We've seen numerous earthquakes, seismic activity really pick up on Mount St. Helens. That was recently an active volcano that wreaked havoc in the Northwest a few decades ago. So sometimes when we see these little mini disasters, or when we see pending disasters, when we are dealing with power outages or big storms, it gives us that opportunity to remember that life doesn't just go on perfect and happy all the time. Things out of our control can happen, and it's a chance for us to be prepared. Oh, I need more water. Oh, I need those lawn johns. Oh, how do I keep my home warm? What are some of the things we can do if we run out of water? Oh, I got a big 50-gallon hot water tank. I can tap into that. There are things that you may not have considered that you need to keep into consideration, because as it ties into Bible prophecy and in the eschatology of the end times, we might come upon differing times, whether it has to do with Bible prophecy or just plain storms, where we're dealing with difficult times and even survival situations.
Well, actually, another thing that I advocate, and if you haven't done this, you need to do it. You need to take all of your important papers and scan them. You can download an app on your smartphone, Can Scanner, Tiny Scanner. Scan all your important papers, put them on a drive. Take all of your family photos. You can scan those as well, and you can have them in a PDF. Because how many times am I seeing the devastation left by tornadoes and hurricanes, and people losing everything and losing all of the mementos, the family photos? So I'm a big advocate of taking your important material, scanning and organizing those PDFs in an online file so that you have them in case of something catastrophic. And even in cold like this, if you have a freezing pipe and that pipe bursts, you're going to have water damage. And so this isn't like something that should be on the to-do list in scanning and putting your important papers in the cloud, and even family photos. Things that if they were to get destroyed by a natural disaster, fire, flood, whatever may come, then at least you have it, or you have a photo of it.
That is great information. Thinking about uploading it to the cloud, thinking about a Dropbox type situation, thinking about just putting it on a disk and sending it to a family member, whatever it may be, to preserve some of the things that are just that precious to you. I've even had folks suggest that you take pictures of things that are precious, that are going to be hard to replace, but maybe not something that you could always just grab if a disaster is looming. You're thinking about human life, not, grandma's jewels. Taking pictures of those things to remember them, taking pictures of those things for insurance purposes. These are things to really think about. We are not living in certain times. And if there's anything that we can learn that's very practical, Erika, from biblical prophecy and some of the conversations that we've had, is that we are not living in certain times. They're not secure. They're not certain. They're tumultuous. And if everything is going the way we think it's going to get a little bit hairier.
Oh, absolutely. And 2018 has already started. And we also have, interestingly enough, a particular moon occurring this month. We had a super moon, and something about it will be another full moon, and we'll have two of them in 1 month, and it hasn't occurred for 150 years. I don't put a lot of stock in the moons, but I do believe that there is various activity that does seem to surround these, and we do notice that we've had a lot of these peculiar moons in like the last few years.
How interesting that you put it in such practical terms that, some can put such emphasis on these moons that it becomes, this very intense spiritual thing. And yet On the flip side, we can just say, oh, it's just a beautiful moon. But there's somewhere in there a real nice balance in saying, look, oftentimes the things that are happening in the heavens are signs. They're ways that they represent something. They always have. And it might behoove us to pay attention. They're not something to be worshipped. They're not something to bow down to, but they're something to look at and say, what's happening here? It's all part of something. In other words, as we talk with Erika Grey, and you can find her at erikagrey.com on our prophecy update, Erika, I think we get segmented and we forget that maybe what's happening as the earth is trembling and storms are raging and politics are becoming more harried, that the earth and the universe is kind of all working together. You know, there's something happening
Absolutely.
everywhere. So it's all part of a bigger picture. We're part of this creation, and creation.
It is, and it's tying in with that and the times. One of the other things I advocate is in Japan, after the earthquakes, there started minimalism, where people would just not have anything more than what they needed. And I'm an advocate of that, but not just because of the times in which we live, but also because as Christians, you know, we don't want to be given over to things. And these signs are more just evidence that Jesus is going to be returning soon, evidence that everything that he said would precede his second coming is happening. So on two levels, should we not be given to things? One, because they can easily get destroyed. So that's why in Japan, the minimalist movement started. But the other reason is it's all the more reason not to live for the things of this earth and to live for the things that are in heaven. That's where our treasure should be. And then it and two birds with one stone, because then also, you know, if you don't have a ton of things, if you find yourself with your home destroyed, it's not as devastating.
Because where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And that's why this part of the program, I think, is so powerful, because as we've talked about some of the news stories, some of the ways that we can prepare for disasters, some of the ways we can be emotionally prepared for 2018, regardless of what happens, let's think about being spiritually prepared too. Look, we're spiritual people. We can't negate that and pretend it doesn't exist, because it becomes vitally important when all hell seems to break loose and disaster strikes. Suddenly we're thinking about the whole thing. Suddenly we care about those spiritual things. Better to be a little spiritually prepared today than to deal with the terror of tomorrow.
Oh, absolutely. And there's another terror that's possibly looming, not just or at least for Americans, it's not just in the weather front, but I've been reporting on articles of our dollar being whittled away. As a matter of fact, Pakistan, we know that they are responding because they're not happy about President Trump wanting to remove funding. So now they're going to not peg. They're no longer going to use the dollar, and they want to peg against the Chinese currency. So that's another issue, is once the U.S. dollar ceases to be the world's reserve, this land of plenty that we've become so used to is not going to be that. We're going to be in another era like during the Depression.
And we need to think that this is not always, we think that this is the way life is and it'll be like that forever. And, you know, there's a chance that things could tarry and we might, you know, for the rest of my life, maybe things will be as they are today. Not likely. If we look around, we've seen 2017 be a year rather, of disaster and trouble for regular people like you and I. And on one hand, when we see the Dow at 25,000 and 250 jobs added to the job market and the lowest layoff since 1990, we think that we're invincible, but that's not necessarily so. So bringing it back home, and maybe in our next week when we hook up with you again, we'll talk more about some of the international things that are happening, some of the more political things. But today, really looking into some of the natural problems like frozen iguanas falling from Florida trees, you know, because weather is crazy. Being prepared physically is important. Preparing yourself emotionally and being ready to take on whatever is there and being set for whatever eventuality, important. But being spiritually prepared is important as well. And I'll give you the final word on that, Erika, to help us on that front.
What's interesting is that with each new year, there's no let up. As a matter of fact, it is exactly as Jesus predicted. It is the birth pangs, the rates of obesity, the suicide. I've read of more records breaking. We're watching it in weather. The time is growing short. If you don't know Jesus, you need to accept him into your life as your personal Savior. And if you already know Christ, there's not much time you need to live as if this is the last day of your life, because there's not much time. We don't know how much longer we actually have left. Many of the signs are now in place.
Wow. So it's a time to think a little deeper and to think about the things that really matter. Erika Grey can be found at erikagray.com. Thank you for joining us today. Happy New Year. It seems almost
Happy New Year.
With looming disaster, it seems like a funny thing to say, but in reality, we have every reason to be hopeful. No matter what the eventuality, there's always life, there's always love, and there's always hope. And that's why we can unequivocally say, Happy New Year. And I wish you a Happy New Year. We'll catch you soon. And coming up live from Seattle,